All right, so have you ever been in a jam scenario where it's you and another guitar player, or maybe it's you and 3 or 4 guitar players, and maybe somebody's singing, and everybody's strumming the same chord, and it sort of sounds, you know, it sounds very redundant, and you feel like you don't want to just do that because they're all doing that. So how can you complement that? You've got a singer singing, so you don't want to just play a lead. There's a time and a place for playing a solo, but what do you do to complement the other music without stepping on the singer, and how do you kind of fit in and do something different? Well, that's what this lesson's all about. And so let's take a listen to this jam track. This is an example of me doing that, and I'm going to show you how to do that with 3 positions, these 3 triads, which are in different spots of the fretboard. They cover the entire fretboard, in fact, and we're going to learn major and minor versions of them, and I'm going to show you embellishments that you can play around them so that you have all these ideas for little fill licks and things you can do to complement. Here's what it's going to sound like. So in this video, I'm going to show you those 3 positions. We'll look at major and minor, and we'll also look at embellishments. And by the way, all of that was played using just the top 3 strings. So that's another kind of nice thing. It's not like you're having to manage all 6 strings. So in this video, we're going to do that. We're also going to go through the first half of that composition. If you'd like to learn the second half, watch that video on that, and then get the tablature and also the MP3 jam track so that you can practice playing everything we're going to talk through. You can get those extra materials for this lesson to practice it all by going to activemelody.com and doing a search for ML111. All right, so let's start off and learn these 3 triads. We're going to start with the major version of them, and it's going to look like this. We're going to play a G on the top 3 strings here, here, and all the way up here. And if you'll notice that I'm spacing them out, there's a pretty good amount of space in between each of them. So it's covering the entire fretboard pretty well. Then it repeats itself, you know, and keeps going up the fretboard. Now, these are related to the caged system. So the caged system has 5 positions, C, A, G, E, and D. And we're looking at 3 of those 5. These are kind of the main 3. This is how I see it anyway. And there's some redundancy. Some of them sort of overlap with these triads, and I don't want to get into all that. But just know that you can see that we're covering pretty much the entire fretboard with this. And this is going to allow you to do just about anything you want to do in terms of real estate and getting at it very easily. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we have to identify the note name on the 1st string, 2nd string, and 3rd string for the chord that we're trying to play. So we're going to start with a G chord. So we just need to find a G note on the 1st string. That's your first mission. Most of you know how to do that, right? That's 3rd fret. And that's because as guitar players, the first thing we do in terms of memorizing the fretboard and learning all the note names on all the frets and strings is we start with that 1st string and 6th string. That's pretty common. But when you get into strings 2, 3, and 4, it starts to get a little weird. At least it did for me. It took me a long time to figure those out. But anyway, and it's just a memorizing thing. Actually, I'll put a lesson up if you want to check out more about my approach for learning the fretboard. But anyway, that's our first note. That's our G note there. Now we need to find a G note on the 2nd string. And to do that, we have to come all the way up here to the 8th fret. Same note, same pitch, but it lives up here. Now we need to find the G note on our 3rd string. And we have 2 options. We can play just an open 3rd string, which is a G, but that's a lower pitch. We want that same pitch, so we have G, G, and then on the 3rd string it'd be on the 12th fret. So those are our 3 notes. The reason we're starting there is because we're now going to connect those little triads to those notes. They're going to be our anchors to being able to easily find these chords and play them. This is also your anchors for playing chord shapes as well, like the full chord if you wanted to go into, more strings. So with this one, we're up here in E shape territory. That's a G chord using the E shape. And if I play just the top 3 strings of that, I'm playing this first triad. Most of you probably know this. You bar the first 2 strings with your index finger and then middle finger on the 4th fret, 3rd string. So that's our first chord shape, our first triad. Then when we come up to this 8th fret, we're gonna play with our ring finger there, and these 2 fingers come in on the 7th fret, strings 1 and 3. And in fact, the shape that they're making is that little triangle shape that you make when you make your D chord in first position. Same shape, we're just making it up here. And just remember this, where your ring finger is, when you make this chord, the tip of that little triangle, that's the name of the chord that you're playing. So that note is a G note, therefore that's a G chord. The same is true when we do the minor version, which we'll get to. Okay, then we come up here to this 12th fret 3rd string, and we play that note. Now the chord shape, triad off of this, looks like this. And that is the top part of our A shape. So there's our A shape, from the cage system, the top part of that looks like this. So, oh, and I didn't mention, when you're playing this would be the top part of your C shape. It would also be the top part of your D shape. So again, that's why I didn't want to get into all 5 positions, because there's some overlap between that D shape and C shape, at least when it comes to this triad here on strings 1, 2, and 3. So what we have now is we have a G chord in 3 spots on the fretboard, and they're all spaced out pretty evenly. So now let's look at a few little embellishments we can add to that. I'm not going to go crazy with these, but here's a real common one off of this E shape here, is you can use your ring finger or pinky to come down on this 5th fret 2nd string and hit that note. You can also slide it up to here to get the flat 7 if you want to blues it up. So that may not sound like much, but you've already got notice I'm coming into that 3rd. So those are just a few little embellishments. The big one being this, that one little idea. Let's take that same sort of idea, come all the way up here to this shape, the top part of your A shape, and do the same kind of thing where I'm going to hit that G note here on the 12th fret 3rd string, but then I'm going to bar on the 10th fret strings 1 and 2, and I'm going to hammer on to the 12th fret 2nd string. Now I'm playing, when I do that, I'm playing the chord, but I'm hammering into it like this. And that gives me that sort of pedal steel leg. And I can slide this in. This to me looks very similar to this. It has a different sound, but in terms of shape and what's going on, it's sort of the same kind of thing. Now the embellishment off of this D shape looks like that. And you've probably done that when you played a D chord, right? In this case, you're playing a G, so that would be like a G sus4. But you can do a lot of cool things with that idea. A little pull off. So those are the embellishments we're going to use as we kind of break this down. Now the last little point I want to make on these is how do we make them minor? It's very simple. You just take the 3rd interval of your chord and you flat it, meaning you go down 1 fret. So off of this E shape here, this E shape triad, where my middle finger is, that's the 3rd, so you come down 1 fret. That one's easy. 1 finger, 1 bar. So now I've got my G minor in this position. Now let's come up to our G chord here, and here's the 3rd interval on the 1st string. We just have to flat it. So we keep our other 2, and so you're kind of rearranging your fingers a little bit. Actually, you keep your ring finger, but now you've got that shape. And actually, that's the same shape as your D minor shape in first position. You learn a D and a D minor, right? So now hopefully you're starting to connect that. Oh yeah, okay, we're just flattening the 3rd. So we're doing it up here. So there's a G minor up here, and the same up here. This time, my 3rd interval is on the 2nd string. So we take that 12th fret 2nd string, we drop it, now we have a little stair step shape. That's where that stair-step shape comes from. I'm always talking about that. And we use that in chord substitutions and all kinds of things. So you've got a G minor here, and one down here. All right, so it may not seem like much yet, but you've already unlocked the entire fretboard in a huge way. Let me just demonstrate that. So if I were to play G, C, and D, for example, a 1, 4, 5, I can start with any of these Gs that we've learned now, these three, and I can play them all in that same neighborhood. So, for example, with the embellishment, here's my G chord. Now let's play the C chord in this area. Instead of coming up here and playing it, let's play it here. So I just kind of have to ask myself, where's my nearest one? The top part of that A shape would be here, right? So I've got... And then where's my nearest D chord? Well, I've got a D right here. So you can see that I'm just sort of embellishing off of those chords here all in one area. But what's cool about this is forget the labels of G, C, and D. Just think 1, 4, 5. So I can do this in any key now. If I were to be playing a song in B flat, are you starting to get that? It's like, whoa, and that's just looking at starting on one of the positions. We could start on this G chord. So there's my G, there's my 1, my C is the next chord. Where's my nearest C? Oh yeah, there it is using that shape. It's right next door. And then my D chord is here using the A shape. And then back to my 1. So then once you get that and you start working in the embellishments, it's like you can play stuff pretty much all over the fretboard. You can also work in minor chords and everything using the same technique. All right, let's get into the jam track. We'll listen to this first part and then we'll break down what's going on. All right, so now that you have all this background information, this is going to be so easy. So we're starting off with sliding in to that G chord here. This is the top part of that E shape, right? That little triad. And it comes in on the and. So if you're counting out, it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. So I'm starting a half step down on this 3rd fret with my middle finger. And then I'm going to go ahead and play the top part of that. And then little embellishment there. And then the song goes to E minor, which is the relative minor of G. And watch this, I played and just let it ring out. Now what is this? You know this shape, right? Here's my E chord, sorry, using the D shape. And then you flat the 3rd because we're playing an E minor. Oh yeah, we've already done all of this. And look at where it is in relation to the G. So my 1 chord, I could keep that G note down, hold that note and play and just switch these fingers. There's my relative minor off of that. Then the song goes to a D, and I came up here thinking about my D chord using the A shape, but the top part of that A shape, right? And I played little embellishments, a little James Taylor style embellishment, something I might have borrowed from James at one point. That sounds like something he would do for sure. And all I'm doing is what I showed you before, where I'm borrowing the first 2 strings on the 5th fret, 7th fret, 3rd string. That's the sus 2. And I'm using my pinky to do a hammer on here to the 7th fret, 2nd string. Isn't that a cool sound? And all of that represents my D. But you can see where it's coming from now. And that sounds so much better than just strumming a D chord, because the rhythm track's already doing that. Then the song goes to an A minor, and I just stayed in the same neighborhood, and I went with a little embellishment off the A minor. So again, sliding into the chords. I do that a lot. That's just another idea. But I slid on this 3rd string from the 4th fret to the 5th fret, and then just played the notes of the chord, just a little arpeggio. Now that's an embellishment off of this minor chord where you skip the next fret up from your bar, and then you hit the next note on that 1st string. So in this case, it would be the 7th fret 1st string to get that sound. All right, so now the song goes back to the G chord, and I do the same thing. Same little embellishment off of that. Then the song goes back to the E minor chord, and what I played here goes... Now some of you are going to be confused by this. I don't want you to get confused, but look at what I'm doing. This is a minor triad we've already looked at. It's the stair-step shape, right? There's my G chord. If I took my G note and I go down 1 fret and play that stair-step shape, there's a lot of ways we can look at this. You could look at that as a G major 7, right? But that doesn't really make sense because the chord is an E minor. That's what the rhythm player is playing an E minor. But as a chord substitution, what you can do is you can play this minor triad, which is not an E minor. It's actually a B minor. That's my B note, right? There's my little B minor triad. But why does that work over the E minor? Why can't I play an E minor? Why can't I play this B minor triad when the song, when the jam track has an E minor? Well, this is just the way that I think of it. This is how I've learned it. When you're going from your 1 chord to its relative minor, which happens a lot in music, so from a G to a E minor, for example, I know that I can go like this. I just know where it is. There's my 1. I can go down and play this next little triad. I know that's so not theoretical. I just know that works. What I'm actually doing, what I'm technically doing, is playing like an E minor 9. This would be getting into the 6 and 9 chord and all of that. And it doesn't have a 3rd in it, so that's why it works. But you just have to know that if there's a minor chord, if you're going from a 1 chord to a relative minor, just remember this little pivot. You can do that as a substitution. Then the song goes back to the D, and I came back to the top part of the A shape and played that same little embellishment idea. This time I slid up, so I barred the first 2 strings on the 5th fret, came up here, slid up to this 8th fret, 2nd string, and then down here, and then played it without, just behind the bar. And then I came down and concluded on that 7th fret, 3rd string. And then the song goes back to the A minor, and I just strummed it and played a little embellishment. And you can see what's going on here. These are basic chords: G, E minor, D, A minor, chords that you already know. But by playing little ideas like this, you can really enhance the music. You're not stepping on the toes of the singer. Even if there's not a singer, you're complementing what's going on, and you're not just sort of joining in with all the strumming, because there's already that going on. They don't need more of that. What they need are these little higher chord voicings that are in different spots on the fretboard. This sounds great with electric guitar as well, letting these notes sort of ring out, putting a tremolo on it. I was kind of debating on doing that. I ended up playing this just because I've been playing this guitar a lot. This, by the way, is my Mule resonator. This is a really cool guitar. I'll put more information, or I'll put the website up, if you're interested in this. This is just a really cool one that I love, and I haven't been playing it because I've had it put away because the humidity's been so bad here. But anyway, I got all my guitars back out, and I'm falling in love with them again. All right, so I'm going to wrap up this part 1 video there. Please leave a comment and let me know if you've liked this and you've picked up some ideas and you know, you're getting excited about this. Come join us for part 2 where we'll go over the second half. Leave a comment also if you're confused by anything. I always appreciate reading them. It really does help me know what's going on. I read through all the comments and I really do appreciate the feedback. All right, that's what we have in this video. I'll see you in part 2 where we'll go over the second half.